My name is Mike Jones. I am the man that exposed Pastor Ted Haggard.
I have sinned against you, my Lord. And I would ask that your precious blood...
They had to do it themselves, but they were scared. Some of their parents knew about what was going on at the church.
A sobbing, disheveled Jim Baker muttering, "Please don't do this to me," was ordered to undergo psychiatric testing today after his attorney said he was suffering hallucinations and severe depression.
When the robe gets stained, it's not the world pointing fingers. It's the congregation raising their hands. From pulpit affairs to little ones' abuse cover-ups and stolen tithes funding private jets, the real drama didn't start on social media. It started right inside the sanctuary. These white pastors didn't get dragged by outsiders or the media. They were exposed by their own choir members, ushers, secretaries, and even family. Number 13, Carl Lentz.
You know who's going to give you peace? It's going to be the expert. His name is Jesus.
Let's start with one of the most popular pastors in New York City. Carl Lentz was probably the face of what you'll call flashy Christianity, leading Hillsong New York City and rubbing shoulders with
I just want to love people more. I just want to love Carl more.
Celebrities like Justin Bieber and the Kardashians. This was a trendy church packed with young professionals who bought into Lentz's modern approach to faith and sermons that felt more like motivational speeches. But on November 4th, 2020, his name was dragged through the mud.
Money and influence revealed that I was a broken guy that had some serious flaws.
Lentz was fired from Hillsong for what the leadership called leadership issues and breaches of trust. Now, while this came as a huge shock to the entire church, the real bombshell was that he admitted to having an extramarital affair, leaving everyone utterly speechless.
Well, that wasn't the primary thing that got me in trouble. It wasn't a thing. It's not like I was out, looking to have sex or looking to commit adultery. I had deep brokenness that manifests itself in a lot of different ways.
The scandal didn't end there. Former nanny Leona Kaimes stepped forward with devastating accusations way back as 6 years ago. From 2011 to 2017, she claimed that Lentz had manipulated, controlled, bullied, abused her during her time working for his family. These weren't just rumors, but bold claims that painted a picture of brutal abuse of power.
And he keeps saying, I manage celebrities and I travel with them. He didn't want to say what he does.
Did you think that was a red flag? He won't give you his last name?
Yeah, it was.
It took a bit longer than that. We dated.
His wife's employment at the church also ended the moment he was fired, and their marriage crumbled under the weight of his betrayals. The 2023 documentary, The Secrets of Hillsong, laid bare the extent of his misconduct, forcing former followers to confront the reality of who their charismatic leader really was. Now, what makes Lentz's downfall really striking is how everything played out in real time. For a leader of over 7,000 people, you can only imagine the effect this would have on the entire church. He was the face of cool Christianity until the mask came off. But just when you thought that was shocking, wait until you hear about a pastor whose own childhood victim waited decades to finally speak. What she revealed shattered an entire empire. Number 12, Robert Morris.
Hamartano, which means missing the mark. For all have sinned, for all have missed the mark and have fallen short of the glory of God.
From the outside, Pastor Robert Morris seemed to have it all, leading Gateway Church, one of the largest congregations in the Dallas area, and even serving as a spiritual advisor to the U.S. President Donald Trump. With political connections and a thriving ministry, Morris commanded the respect of his entire congregation.
Morris did rise to prominence through the years, founding the Gateway Megachurch in Southlake.
But all of that came crashing down in June 2024, when a woman named Cindy Clemisher found the courage to speak out about a horrific secret she'd carried for decades. Everyone thought she had lost her mind until the evidence started creeping out of the dark.
It took me, like I said, it took me 18 years from when I told to be able to call it and that he to accept those words, to finally understand that that is abuse and really evil and actually a crime.
She accused Morris of repeatedly her when she was just a child, beginning when she was only 12 years old and continuing until she was 16. The allegations were devastating, painting a picture of Ann that had haunted her for over 4 decades. Morris had to resign immediately, but his name was already messed up. In March 2025,
Morris resigned last June after being indicted for a 12-year-old girl in the 1980s.
He was indicted on 5 counts of lewd or indecent acts with a child, proving that even powerful pastors aren't above the law. The legal proceedings revealed some even more disturbing details, that his church leaders had conspired to cover up the just to protect their financial interests. Clemashire filed a $1 million lawsuit, not just against Morris, but against the entire church that helped sweep his crimes under the rug.
Inappropriate behavior. His attorney hasn't replied to our request for comment, and Morris...
Now you can imagine what would have happened if all her claims were simply dismissed, because, of course, Pastor Robert had the world on his side. The scandal continues to rock Gateway Church till today, serving as a very strong reminder that even predators can hide behind pulpits for decades before their victims find their voice. The courtroom wasn't the only place Morris got exposed. His entire church was complicit in the silence. But next, what happens when you're Billy Graham's grandson and can't stop cheating, not once, but twice in public? You'd think one scandal was enough, but this next pastor downfall only got messier. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 99% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Number 11. Tullian Tchividjian.
The controversy began when Tchividjian publicly confessed to the affair, but he initially framed the narrative around his wife's unfaithfulness.
Being Billy Graham's grandson should have been Tullian Tchividjian's greatest blessing, but it became his heaviest burden when scandals started crawling through his ministry. As senior pastor of Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church from 2009 to 2015, Tchividjian carried the weight of his family's evangelical legacy while building his reputation as a gifted preacher and author. But the first crack in his armor appeared in June 2015, when he was forced to resign after admitting to an extramarital affair, as the church elders declared him unfit for Christian ministry. For a man whose grandfather was the voice that drove millions to Christ and counseled presidents, this was a terrible and unthinkable fall from grace. But Tchividjian's story didn't end there. In 2016, just as he was attempting to rebuild his career at Willow Creek, another bombshell dropped.
God's grace, really, which is part of my motivation for writing Surprised by Grace. I mean, it's a story about Jonah.
He revealed a second affair, and his firing was even quicker than the last. We know the stakes are always higher for pastors because they are meant to serve as the mouthpiece of God to the congregation. But on 2 different occasions of infidelity, that wasn't just a coincidence. It's a character issue that has completely destroyed Tullian's credibility. Members who had defended and believed in his message felt betrayed and manipulated. Churches associated with him faced difficult questions. Book deals were canceled, and speaking engagements disappeared.
Come out of something so bad, is it possible that resurrection could follow death?
All his attempts to stage a spiritual comeback were met with outrage from former congregation members who refused to stay silent. At this point, it's safe to say that ministering as a pastor is completely over for him. Double affairs, broken trust, and a ruined legacy made Tullian a disaster. But let's rewind to the original televangelist meltdown. The next pastor cried on TV, begged for forgiveness, and then did it again and again. You'll never guess what his final excuse was. Number 10. Jimmy Swaggart.
I'm sick of filthy, depraved, long-haired, smelly, stinky, beer-guzzling, coke-snorting, smoking freaks.
Tullian's fall might be a shocker, but Jimmy Swaggart was the last person anyone would expect. Jimmy Swaggart was a televangelist who reached millions through his passionate sermons and tearful appeals for salvation. His ministry was based in Louisiana and generated huge wealth, with his influence stretching far beyond the American South. Everyone knew him for his emotional preaching style and musical talents. But it didn't take long until everything began to fade.
Don't you know this is God? This is the Son of God.
It all started in 1987 when, shockingly, he was caught with a named Deborah Murphy. It came as an unexpected blow to his millions of followers across the world, which led him to make a public confession that's just impossible to forget.
What he had taken others down for over the years. After 2 months of Jimmy staying silent, Marvin got fed up and released the photos in Jimmy's curbside confession to the board of the Assemblies of God.
He sobbed before his congregation and television cameras in what happened to be a really emotional repentance, but it didn't last long. In 1991, he was caught again, this time with another.
Jimmy acknowledged that what he had done was wrong, and he was prepared to face the consequences of his actions.
When confronted this time, his response was absolutely shameless, claiming that his affairs were no one's business. A third scandal hit in 1994, and this time, no one had any bit of sympathy for him. His congregation wasn't having it anymore.
And they're screaming, "Crucify."
But despite all these, Swaggart kept preaching independently, claiming God still backed him despite facing this rejection. Church members who had defended him through the first scandal felt completely betrayed by the second and third. Even his family members distanced themselves from him. The signs were clear. Jimmy Swaggart had lost his place as a preacher, all at the expense of his desires. Swaggart fell 3 times and still tried to preach, but this next pastor's story flips the script. This time, it wasn't the husband, it was the widow. Wait until you hear what her own children exposed about her luxurious sins. Number 9, Joni Lamb.
By the way, there are questions about it's all over the internet that Daystar paid $100,000.
Joni Lamb became the president and CEO of Daystar Television Network after her husband Marcus's death in 2021. But what should have been a smooth transition into leadership turned into a family civil war, with her own children leading the charge against her. The Trinity Foundation started digging into Joni's lifestyle and discovered she was living an extravagant life on the ministry's money. They found out that she'd been using the ministry jet for her personal trips that cost over $1 million more than commercial flights. She would constantly ask viewers for donations, but all that money goes straight to funding her luxurious lifestyle. Everyone began asking questions, but the real storm came from her own family.
She abandoned him. That's his excuse, that his ex-wife abandoned him. The ex-wife is running his business. The ex-wife, from his own lips, we have other recordings where he said she was.
Her son Jonathan and daughter-in-law Susie went public with accusations that Joni was covering up child abuse and engaging in serious financial misconduct. The family claimed that Joni constantly discouraged them from reporting her abuse by a male family member, choosing to protect the ministry's reputation over child safety. Let's not even talk about her scandal with Doug Weiss, who said he always wanted.
I mess up my wife all the time because I want more the rest of my life.
The whole accusations caused a lot of TV personalities to leave the network as the scandal spread like wildfire through the Christian community. Well, Jonathan Lamb got fired in November 2024 for job performance, and that even further heightened the controversies.
Recently, Daystar made the decision to terminate my son Jonathan Lamb's employment. That decision was not taken lightly. It followed a 15-month review of Jonathan's performance and his refusal to take any steps to satisfy a detailed performance improvement plan put in place.
Insiders say it was because he refused to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Meanwhile, Joni's compensation jumped 140% to around $1 million after her husband's death. The disturbing truth is, everything was simply an internal cover-up designed to protect Joni Lamb and the ministry's name. Joni's family turned on her and revealed secrets that shook the Christian world. But what happens when an entire congregation turns on their pastor? This pastor ran his church like a king until insiders tore the throne out from under him. Number 8, James McDonald.
God makes no distinction between your words and your thoughts. They are equally audible to him.
Some pastors fall from grace gradually, but for James McDonald, his empire collapsed like a pack of cards when his own people finally said they've had enough. For over 3 decades, Pastor James McDonald ruled Harvest Bible Chapel with an iron fist, hosting the popular Walk in the Word broadcast while exercising a sort of authoritarian control over his members. The warning signs became clear as early as 2013.
I ended up telling my story of how I got to be here a lot, and it comes into various
messages because there's new people here and I want them to hear it. But no offense, I've been through some difficult things. And
when MacDonald excommunicated 3 former elders who dared question his leadership style, they described everything going on in there as a culture built on fear and intimidation that made people terrified to speak up. He apologized and brought them back in 2014, but things were no longer the same. Then the questions about the church's finances started surfacing thanks to some brave whistleblowers inside the organization. It turned out that MacDonald had been using ministry funds like his personal piggy bank, buying a vintage 1971 Volkswagen Beetle as a gift, and purchasing Harley-Davidson motorcycles for random people.
For you to actually change when you come to the fork in the road and you're like, I always do B. I always do B. How am I gonna do A?
Somehow, this pastor seemed to get away with everything until March 2023 when he was arrested for allegedly assaulting a 59-year-old woman in a parking lot. His elders fired him immediately in February 2019 for conduct harmful to the church's best interests. Sometimes, the best way to preserve the church is by pulling out the corrupt person from the roots. Even if that person happens to be the pastor, buying vintage cars with church funds is bad, but at least it wasn't meth and male escorts. Coming up next is the story of a pastor who publicly preached against homosexuality while secretly living a double life for years. Number 7. Ted Haggard.
And in doing so, he would confess at a later date, quote, I fully intended to expose Oral Roberts in order to advance my career.
Ted Haggard founded and led New Life Church in Colorado Springs and served as president of the National Association of Evangelicals until November 2006. With political influence and a growing megachurch, Haggard was positioned as one of evangelicalism's rising stars. But a shocking revelation changed everything.
My name is Mike Jones. I am the man that exposed Pastor Ted Haggard.
One of Ted Haggard's male escorts, Mike Jones, decided he'd had enough of watching Haggard preach against while secretly paying him for methamphetamine and anonymous for 3 years. The revelations weren't just one encounter. Jones detailed a long-term relationship that made Haggard's anti-gay political positions look absolutely hypocritical.
How did you find him to get a massage from him?
A referral. From the hotel I was staying at.
The hotel where?
But Jones wasn't the only one with weird stories about the preacher. It was at this point that other church members started coming forward with their own shocking claims. One alleged that Haggard had in front of him and offered during a church trip. The church quickly wrote a check for $179,000 to make that problem disappear, but that wasn't the end. Another church attendee reported an inappropriate relationship that crossed serious boundaries, and once again,
I knew that there were others that I could not publicly out. They had to do it themselves, but they were scared. Some of their parents knew.
The ministry reached for its checkbook instead of calling for strict accountability. Then settlements kept piling up until the pastor's secret life became unbearable and he had to come out clean and confess.
I told him I was having temptations and thoughts like that, and I needed to process through it. What should I do?
The church board moved swiftly to remove Haggard the moment the scandal exploded across different national media, but the damage was done already. A second wave hit in 2009 when another former attendee, now an adult, reported non-consensual contact while he was still a young boy serving in the church, all from the same man who stood before them every Sunday to preach the gospel. Meth, lies, and hush money were only the beginning. Because the next preacher didn't just lie, he manipulated women for decades, fathered a child through incest, and still stood at the pulpit like nothing ever happened. Number 6. Earl Polk.
And I am so sorry for any hardship that's come in your life or your family because of me.
Earl Polk founded the Cathedral at Chapel Hill in the Atlanta suburbs as an interracial megachurch that grew to 10,000 members. He positioned himself as a progressive voice fighting racism while building a ministry empire that seemed genuinely committed to social justice. But behind all that righteous talk, Polk was using his position to manipulate and abuse the very people he claimed to serve.
Multiple women accused Polk of manipulating them into having relations with him.
The Brewers were pillars in Bishop Polk's church.
You see, In the early 1990s, congregation members began coming forward with allegations of manipulation against Paulk and his family ministers, including his brother Don. These weren't just isolated incidents. It was more like a consistent pattern of SA that had been hidden within the church's power structure for years. Sunday school teacher Mona Brewer became the first to speak publicly, claiming she's been having an affair with Paulk for 14 years now. She later testified that church leadership tried to silence her using spiritual authority and institutional pressure. Her courage seemed to have opened the gates for other victims to come forward. In 2001, Jessica Battle sued Paulk for that began when she was 7 and escalated to forced S at 17. Everything started spilling out really fast.
Earl, Paulk's nephew and a senior pastor at his church, revealed that Paulk was actually his father. Through a court-ordered paternity test, it was discovered.
The most insane revelation came in 2007 when Paulk's nephew, D.E. Paulk, stunned the entire congregation with DNA test results proving Earl Paulk was actually his biological father. As unbelievable as it sounds, Earl Paulk had fathered a child through incest with his sister-in-law, throwing the entire family into shambles. It's hard to think that this same man climbs the pulpit every Sunday to teach the gospel while doing unspeakable acts in secret. Paulk pled guilty to perjury in 2008 for lying under oath about the affair, receiving 10 years probation. Incest rocked Earl Paulk's world, but this next pastor's twisted kingdom took everything to a darker level. We're talking child brides, locked gates, and a corpse left in the house for a year. This wasn't a church. This was a cult built on pure madness. Number 5. Tony Alamo. Paulk's scandal might sound impossible to believe.
Stay right in there with us for the next 1/2 hour with gospel testimonies, songs, and a message.
But Tony Alamo took it a mile further. Pastor Tony created what looked like a church, but was actually a cult that terrorized members through brainwashing, abuse, and exploitation. The Alamo Christian Foundation was already notorious for extreme practices and hateful preaching, but those were nothing compared to the real horrors that were happening behind closed doors.
And then when we got married, I says, God has got to love me.
Former members who managed to escape were now dishing out stories that sound like something pulled out of a horror movie. They testified to Child A. Sobe that victims ended up being hospitalized. He claimed that they were simply discipline sessions, but they were nothing but bee torture designed to break their spirits and ensure complete submission to Alamo's twisted authority. But the most disturbing allegations involved forced marriages to wives as young as 8 years old. Alamo used religious authority to justify these absurd marriages, creating a system of legalized child R that continued for years, all in the name of spiritual practice. To help you understand better, after his wife Susan died, he kept her rotting corpse at the compound for an entire year, claiming he was waiting for God to resurrect her. That alone screams a man who is both heartless and mentally ill.
He is an evangelist. At this hour, state and federal investigators are combing his church compound.
In 2008, a government raid finally rescued children from the compound amid allegations of child and polygamy. The raid happened because some survivors had escaped and contacted authorities who came to their rescue. The following year, Alamo was convicted on 10 counts of transporting minors as young as 9 across state lines for earning 175 years in prison. That means he'll probably spend the rest of his life behind bars. Tony was dragged out in handcuffs, but this next pastor was exposed on national television by a magician. If you thought divine healing was real, just wait until you find out how he was feeding off the desperate with a secret earpiece and a stage act straight out of Vegas. Number 4. Peter Popoff. You know those moments when someone seems so spiritually gifted that you doubt if any of it is real. Well, with Peter Popoff, your instincts would have been right.
You're going to see a miracle touch in your own life as you use it. Amen. I believe the power is just going to flow to you.
This self-proclaimed faith healer had audiences completely mesmerized as he called out specific names, addresses, and ailments from crowds, creating an atmosphere of miraculous spiritual connection that drew thousands of desperate believers seeking healing and hope.
Saw a number of high-profile preachers amass fame and fortune for their apparent healing and clairvoyant powers.
Night after night, Popoff would walk through his audience and somehow divinely know exactly who needed prayer and what was wrong with them. People genuinely believed they were witnessing supernatural revelation, and honestly, if you didn't know better, it looked pretty convincing.
In the audience, and then fed it to her husband electronically through a tiny earpiece.
But the whole thing was a well-planned con game that got exposed in 1986 by magician skeptic James Randi. Using radio scanning equipment, Randi discovered Popoff was receiving all those personal details through a hidden earpiece, with his wife Elizabeth feeding him information from backstage after collecting prayer cards from arriving audience members. The whole revelation aired on The Tonight Show, and millions of viewers watched in real time as the supposed miracle worker was revealed to be nothing more than a skilled performer. The revelation destroyed everything Popoff had ever built, as it became clear to everyone that they'd been manipulated instead of experiencing God's power.
Can you just answer us one question?
Can you just move away, please?
Would you talk to us later, please?
No.
He declared bankruptcy in 1987 as donations collapsed, but like a bad penny, he returned in the late 1990s, pushing miracle spring water through late-night infomercials. Even in 2025, British regulators had to impose a £150,000 fine to shut down his UK operations immediately before he scammed even more people. A fake faith healer was shocking enough, but how about a Christian theme park mogul who built an empire on lies, paid off his accuser, and still smiled into the camera like nothing happened? This next pastor's downfall was a full-blown financial and moral collapse. Number 3. Jim Bakker.
If every person watching could double their pledge right now, that way we can save the Word of God.
Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker were a husband and wife evangelical team that gained...
Last on the list, this pastor is proof that when you build an empire on lies, it's only a matter of time before the truth starts crawling out through the cracks. Jim Bakker co-founded the PTL Club and masterminded Heritage USA, a massive Christian theme park in South Carolina that drew millions of visitors while his television ministry reached homes across America, generating enormous wealth and influence that seemed bulletproof. But empires built on deception have a funny way of crumbling from within.
I did not handle my checkbook. I did not handle even my own finances. I was busy doing these things.
In 1987, former church secretary Jessica Hahn stepped forward with allegations that would destroy everything Bakker had built. She accused him of and revealed he'd paid her $279,000 to keep her mouth shut. The whole scandal forced Bakker's resignation on March 19, 1987, as he desperately tried damage control by handing PTL leadership to Jerry Falwell. But the rot went much deeper than one assault allegation.
Prosperity gospel was the truth. I really thought that God wanted us to not have any problem.
Investigations revealed Bakker had a culture of defrauding his own congregation through a lifetime partnership scheme, selling far more packages than could ever be honored while funneling PTL funds into personal bonuses totaling $3.4 million. Staff members and investigative reporting pulled back the curtain on hidden bookkeeping, but it was insider sources who provided the documentation that made prosecution possible.
A sobbing, disheveled Jim Bakker, muttering, "Please don't do this to me," was ordered to undergo psychiatric testing today after his attorney said he was suffering hallucinations and severe depression.
In 1989, a jury found Bakker guilty on all 24 counts of fraud and conspiracy, sentencing him to 45 years in prison, but he only served 5. Of course, PTL collapsed completely, with Heritage USA going bankrupt, the media empire crumbling to the ground, and thousands of employees losing their jobs. His downfall wasn't really caused by external enemies, but by insiders who thought it was high time the wolf among them got exposed. Jim got locked up for scamming millions, while this next pastor was never even charged. When your church makes tens of millions while your city drowns in a flood, questions start piling up fast. You'll be stunned at what this pastor's critics inside his own church are now saying. Number 2, Joel Osteen.
Peter dropped the Popol at this small wood frame house. One bed, one table, nothing to it.
Everyone knows Joel Osteen as the pastor who transformed Lakewood Church in Houston into America's largest congregation with approximately 45,000 weekly attendees, all drawn by his lovely smile and relentlessly positive messages that promise God wants everyone happy, healthy, and wealthy.
I mean, 12 years ago, I was running camera at my dad's church, doing the production, things like that.
But underneath that shiny suit, critics within his own congregation began rolling their eyes at what they called cotton candy theology, spiritual junk food that focuses on personal prosperity over biblical truth. Some members complained that Osteen's sermons emphasized feeling good about yourself rather than actual spiritual depth, more like therapy rather than worship.
It can house 10,000 people, showers, dormitories, kitchens, security, all that. They didn't need us as a shelter at that point.
The criticism got intense when Lakewood reportedly received $4.4 million in COVID-19 funds through the CARES Act. While they eventually repaid the money, congregation members questioned why a megachurch with massive resources needed taxpayer assistance while small businesses struggled to survive. Then,
it can house 10,000 people, showers, dormitories, kitchens, security, all that.
Hurricane Harvey in 2017 provided another flashpoint when Lakewood was accused of refusing to open its massive facility as a shelter while Houston residents desperately needed refuge. Many congregants felt the delayed response exposed a serious lack of compassion for their community's crisis. The church's income hit $89 million in 2017 alone, mostly from congregants, yet people keep pointing out that very little goes toward actual charitable causes compared to other megachurches. And when anyone tries to get him on the mic, he quickly shoves aside any conversation. That alone proves that there is a lot more going on that no one is talking about. Osteen's feel-good gospel had critics raising eyebrows, but this final pastor raised them into orbit. Private jets, divine threats, and a quote so outrageous it went viral worldwide. Wait till you hear what he said about Flying Coach. You'll never look at him the same again. Number 1. Kenneth Copeland.
Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did.
Kenneth Copeland built an empire preaching that God wants believers to be filthy rich, and he certainly practiced what he preached. As founder of Eagle Mountain International Church and Kenneth Copeland Ministries, he accumulated a fleet of private jets that screamed a deep obsession for luxury, including a Citation Bravo, Citation X, and a Gulfstream V, formerly owned by Tyler Perry.
And your senses didn't tell you that. In fact, the devil came along and said, nah, you didn't get anything. Well, you might have listened to him for a while.
His prosperity theology was that faithful givers would always get 100-fold returns, but critics within his own organization began questioning where all that money was really going. The Trinity Foundation's Pastor Planes project started tracking Copeland's jet usage, exposing lavish travel patterns that seemed more about luxury than ministry. From 2007 to 2011.
Wait a minute now. I'm not talking about some people. I'm talking about the Bible. The blessing of Abraham.
Copeland was one of 6 televangelists investigated by Senator Grassley's Senate Finance Committee. Unlike secular organizations, Copeland's ministry refused full cooperation with the inquiry, which only made everyone more suspicious. But the pressure wasn't just coming from outside. Former employees started speaking out about the intimidation tactics inside the ministry.
The simple act of faith. Mark 11:23.
They claimed they were threatened with divine punishment if they ever criticized leadership or exposed any financial irregularities. When you're threatening your own staff with God's wrath for asking questions, that alone proves that a whole lot is going on behind the curtain. But when pressed about his extravagant lifestyle, Copeland defended flying private by saying commercial flights were like being in a tube full of demons.
He had become famous and they wanted him to pray for him and all that. You can't manage that today.
Right.
This dope-filled world.
Right.
And get in a long tube with a bunch of demons.
The man called regular passengers demons while his members funded his luxury travel. Despite massive donations, his organization provides 0 publicly available financial statements as to how the money was spent. What more can you expect?
Bruce Hall reports. A sobbing, disheveled Jim Baker muttering, "Please don't do this to me," was ordered to undergo psychiatric testing today after his attorney said he was suffering hallucinations and severe depression.
All of these shocking revelations only point to one truth, that sometimes when shepherds become wolves, it's the sheep who bite back. From pop stars to presidents, these pastors fooled millions. But they couldn't outrun the people who knew them best. When the faithful get fed up, no pulpit is high enough to hide behind. And if you think these stories were wild, just wait till you see the next video. Rich black pastors who lied about God for fame. You won't believe who's on that list.